On a dark summer night in 1969, at this very spot along Lake Worth, a couple was attacked by what they described as a half-man, half-goat. As crazy as that sounds, these two people were not the only witnesses to the incident. After a police investigation, the Fort Worth Star-Telegram ran news articles that would become the stuff of legends, both locally and around the world, as the story made headlines and even inspired a book. This is the story of what took place right here in the wooded outskirts north of Fort Worth, Texas.
On the evening of July 9th, 1969, John Reichard and his wife Linda decided to take a drive to the scenic shores of Lake Worth, just 10 miles north of their home in Fort Worth. John had heard the fishing was good at a spot known as Greer Island, so the couple packed up a few things and headed there around sundown. The area was something of a popular hangout where couples could find privacy, or guys could fish the lake and drink a few beers. It wasn't far from the legendary cowboy town, but with the thickly wooded surroundings and miles of fresh water, it was definitely a world away, at least back in those days. When they arrived, John parked the car across from Greer Island and prepared his fishing gear. Even though there were 2 other cars with couples inside parked nearby, the remoteness, along with the surrounding darkness, gave Linda second thoughts about getting out of the car herself. The lake was probably beautiful by day, but at night, the isolation among the hovering trees and moon shadows gave her an eerie feeling. She decided to stay in the passenger seat and read by the car light, while John walked down to the shore to fish. A short time later, while John was fishing on the peaceful lake, a scream shattered the stillness. It had come from his wife. John spun around and looked towards their car. He was shocked to see something moving around on the roof. John threw aside his fishing rod and started running up the bank toward the car. Linda was screaming, and he could hear commotion coming from the 2 other cars parked nearby. By now, the thing, whatever it was, had moved from the roof of the car and was now standing at the passenger side window where Linda was sitting. The closer John got to the car, the more he panicked. The thing was standing upright on 2 legs like a person, yet looked like it could be some kind of animal or beast. It was covered in wild white hair and what looked like horns or some kind of protrusions on its head. Some parts of it glimmered like scales of a fish. When he reached the car, he nearly tackled the thing without thinking. It did not fall to the ground, but the shove sent it stumbling away from the vehicle. For a moment, John was essentially face to face with it. He would later describe it as a half-man, half-goat, which was the only way to explain the bizarre beast. John scrambled to the other side of the car and jumped into the driver's seat. He started the ignition as his wife continued to scream. The goat thing must have regained its footing and lunged for the car. Its clawed hand scraped along the passenger side door with a terrible sound. John hit the gas pedal and started down North Shore Drive with a blast of dust and gravel. The thing tried to jump on the back of the car, scratching and grasping for a hold with its hands. John heaved the wheel of the vehicle back and forth. The jerking motion caused the thing to lose its grip, sending it careening to the road where it landed in the dirt.
This is the road that the couple drove down that night as they fled the scene, feeling lucky to have escaped alive. By day, it looks pretty peaceful, but at night, especially back in those days, it would have been pretty spooky.
John raced from the wooded roads to a nearby cafe called Chenault's. Both he and Linda ran inside, panicked, yet relieved to have escaped. John borrowed their phone to call the police. My late friend Bill Morris was inside the cafe that very night. He was a Fort Worth resident who frequently visited Lake Worth to hang out with friends or to do some fishing. He didn't know what had happened to the couple, but he could tell it must have been bad. The woman was shaking, taking in deep breaths as she sobbed and shuddered. The man looked sweaty and disheveled. A short time later, Patrolman James McGee of the Fort Worth Police Department entered the restaurant and asked for Mr. Reichert. John and Linda got up and followed the officer outside. 3 more patrol cars pulled into the lot as John was explaining to McGee what had happened. Linda said she first saw the creature, or whatever it was, when it dropped from a nearby tree to the top of the car. It then moved to the passenger side door and tried to reach in and grab her. She slid to the other side of the car, barely avoiding its claws as she let out a scream. The officer found the story dubious, but John assured him that neither he nor his wife had been drinking and that everything they told him had truly happened. John took the officers to his car and pointed to a long scratch down the side that he said had been made by the thing's claw-like hands. McGee examined the scratch, feeling that there could be some truth to the wild tale. 2 more cars pulled into the cafe parking lot. It was the other couples who had been at Greer Island during the attack. They corroborated the story, telling officers they had also seen the thing before it ran into the woods and disappeared. John and his wife agreed to accompany the officers back to Greer Island so they could point out just where the attack had occurred. The police units followed him down North Shore Drive. When they arrived at the spot, they searched for signs of the alleged beast, but did not find anything. They were not really surprised, however. The woods around Greer Island were dark and dense where anything, be it human or animal, could easily hide. The story the 6 witnesses told police was extremely bizarre, and the reality of a half-man, half-goat seemed totally far-fetched, yet the officers could not completely dismiss the incidents outright. And this wasn't the first time they had received reports about some kind of monstrous thing lurking around the lake, nor would it be the last. The department had been receiving calls about some kind of strange thing lurking around Lake Worth for at least 2 months, but so far they had dismissed the reports as nonsense. Now they weren't sure what to think, since they had 6 sober people claiming to have seen something they believed was a monster. The news article indicated that the police suspected a prank. John Reichert thought otherwise. During my research into the case over the years, I have spoken to a number of people who were either there at the time or had first-hand knowledge of details that were never shared publicly. Unfortunately, I never spoke to John Reichert myself. He passed away in 2003. But I have spoken to his son, Eric Reichert, at length. Eric remembers the story well, having heard it many times as he was growing up. He assures me that his father believed it was some sort of a beast he fought with that night rather than someone dressed in a costume. Eric said his father didn't like to speak of the incident very often, since people tended to laugh at him, but nonetheless, he never changed his story.
When the story was published in the 1969 edition of the Fort Worth Star-Telegram, it immediately went viral, so to speak. By the following evening, numerous people were gathered right here at this location called the Pit, hoping to get a glimpse of the monster for themselves. What they would see would literally send them running.
By the evening of Friday, July 10th, there were as many as 200 people gathered at a landmark known as the Pit. Members of the crowd, which reportedly included a park ranger, were sitting on their cars talking when several of them noticed an upright figure run across the adjacent road and disappear into the trees near a small cliff that overlooked the large grassy area of the pit. Moments later, an animal-like scream rang out as the figure emerged on the top of the ridge. Everyone turned to look as it began running back and forth along the rocky rim. The figure was on two legs and appeared to be white or gray in color. Several people started running toward the ridge, causing the whatever it was to run up into the woods. Moments later, it re-emerged holding a rubber tire with the wheel rim still attached. It rushed towards the group of people and hurled the heavy tire above the heads of the shocked onlookers. Witnesses estimated the tire traveled up to 500 feet before it skidded to rest in the grassy part of the clearing. Everyone agreed that the tire appeared to have been hurled, not rolled, a feat that would have been difficult for your average prankster. People began screaming while most of them immediately fled on foot or jumped into their cars and drove off. Some of them drew guns and were ready to fire. Fortunately, no one was hurt during the commotion, which was a very real possibility given the firearms and panicked crowd. The following day, July 11th, the Fort Worth Star-Telegram ran a follow-up article that recounted the details of the new sighting. Those who had seen the figure on the cliff described it as being large with gray or white hair on its body, much like a goat or perhaps a light-colored ape. Some of the witnesses believed they also saw horns. A man by the name of Jack Harris told reporters, quote, "The creature walked like a man, but didn't look like one. He looked like he was 7 feet tall and must have weighed about 300 pounds. The incidents were also covered by local television stations, most notably WFAA-TV Channel 8, who sent a reporter to interview witnesses on July 11th. Following the Reicherts' terrifying encounter and the incident at the pit, other people would claim to see some kind of white hairy thing roaming the shores of Lake Worth, making this one of the most significant cryptid cases on record in my home state. Some, like John Reichert, described it as a Goatman, while the majority of the witnesses claimed it looked ape-like, something like a white-haired Bigfoot. A man named Alan Plaster even managed to snap a photo of a hairy white thing as it was standing in the trees near the lake on November 19, 1969. He was driving down North Shore Drive at about 1:30 a.m. with two friends when they saw something standing in a grassy area near the side of the road. Alan grabbed the Polaroid camera sitting in the seat next to him. The thing started to run, but not before Alan snapped a single photo. He could not be sure whether it was the actual creature or a person wearing a costume, but either way, it was not something Alan hoaxed himself. Whatever is depicted in the photo remains a mystery to this day.
Many people claim to have seen the beast in the months and years that followed, making this an intriguing case that straddles the line between cryptid and urban legend. And it's one that's remembered by many of the local residents to this very day. And it will probably never be forgotten, as the tale is shared by new generations. The infamous Goatman of Greer Island, the Lake Worth monster. For a more in-depth dive into the case, including more sightings, photos, and analysis of the various hoax theories, pick up a copy of my book on Amazon or at monstrobizarro.com. If you want to check out the area yourself, visit the Fort Worth Nature Center at Lake Worth. The Nature Center even hosts a Lake Worth Monster Bash event every 2 years to celebrate the legend. I'll post the link below. Be sure to like and subscribe to my channel. Thanks.